The virus is ready. Release in November. When Fauci's WhatsApp message to Xi Jinping echoed through the congressional chamber, journalists jumped from their seats. Byron Donalds held up the phone. "Dr. Fauci, is this your number?" Fauci stammered, "This is fake, deep fake." Kash Patel interrupted. WhatsApp confirmed these messages are authentic. Date September 15, 2019. The hearing room in the Rayburn House office building had seen many dramatic moments, but nothing quite like this. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the man who had become the face of America's COVID response, sat at the witness table, his usual confident demeanor crumbling by the second. Across from him, Kash Patel and Byron Donalds had assembled what they called the most damning evidence of scientific malfeasance in human history. It had started 6 months earlier when a Chinese defector arrived at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo with an encrypted hard drive. Dr. Li Wei, a former researcher at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, claimed to have evidence that would shake the foundations of global health governance. The CIA initially dismissed him as another conspiracy theorist, until they cracked the encryption. What they found sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Thousands of messages between Fauci and Chinese researchers. Laboratory records showing gain-of-function experiments. Financial transfers through a maze of NGOs. And most damning of all, a detailed timeline showing COVID-19 wasn't an accident, it was a plan. Kash Patel had been brought in to lead the investigation. His first move was to subpoena every electronic device Fauci had used in the past 5 years. Fauci's lawyers fought it, claiming executive privilege, doctor-patient confidentiality, even national security. But when a federal judge saw the preliminary evidence, he not only granted the subpoena but ordered U.S. Marshals to ensure nothing was destroyed. The raid on Fauci's home and offices yielded a treasure trove: burner phones with Chinese SIM cards, encrypted laptops with connections to Wuhan servers, and a personal safe containing documents that should have been in government archives or destroyed years ago. Now, in the congressional hearing, those documents were being revealed to the world. "Let's start from the beginning," Byron Donalds said, adjusting his microphone. "Dr. Fauci, in 2017, you gave a speech at Georgetown University where you predicted, and I quote, a surprise outbreak during the Trump administration. How did you know?" Fauci shifted in his seat. "That was based on historical patterns of disease emergence. Or was it based on this?" Kash Patel interrupted, projecting a document on the screen. "This is a grant proposal you personally approved in 2017. $3.7 million to EcoHealth Alliance for Coronavirus Research in Wuhan. But look at the project description." The document zoomed in on a specific paragraph. "Creation of chimeric coronaviruses with enhanced human transmissibility for pandemic preparedness research. You funded the creation of COVID-19, Byron stated flatly. "That's a gross mischaracterization," Fauci protested. "This was defensive research to prepare for natural pandemic threats." Natural. Kash pulled up the WhatsApp messages. "Let's see how natural this was." September 15, 2019, you write to Dr. Xi Jinping, "The virus is ready. Release in November." Her response confirmed November release. "Market or lab accident scenario." Your reply, "Market provides better cover story." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. The committee chair gavelled for order. "These messages are fabricated," Fauci shouted over the noise.
"This is a witch hunt." "Really?"
Byron pulled out a laptop. "This is your personal computer seized from your home. Our forensics team found these same messages in your WhatsApp backup. Same timestamps. Same metadata. Same contact photos." He clicked through more messages, each more damning than the last. October 2019. "Ensure all lab records show natural origin research only. Delete gain-of-function references." October 15, 2019. "My contacts at WO are prepared. They'll delay international response to allow spread." October 28, 2019. "Moderna has the vaccine sequence. They'll be ready to profit when we give the signal." November 3, 2019. "Patient 0 infected yesterday. Countdown begins." Fauci's lawyer, Robert Bennett, leaned into his microphone. "My client invokes his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination." Kash Patel smiled coldly. "That's probably wise, considering what else we found." He pulled up financial records. "Dr. Fauci, your net worth in 2019 was approximately $5 million. Respectable for a career government scientist. But look at these offshore accounts we discovered." The screen showed bank statements from the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Deposits totaling $65 million, all made between December 2019 and March 2020. Where did this money come from, doctor? Fauci remained silent, but sweat was now visibly beading on his forehead. Let me help you, Byron said. Our investigation traced these deposits back to their source. Chinese pharmaceutical companies, the same companies that would later manufacture COVID vaccines and treatments. They paid you $65 million. For what, Dr. Fauci? Kash clicked to another slide. Here's what. Patent applications filed by your wife's consulting firm in November 2019, before the world knew COVID existed. Patents for coronavirus treatments, diagnostic tests, even the specific vaccine formulation that would later be used globally. You knew what was coming because you helped design it, Byron accused. You created the virus, you created the panic, and you profited from both. The evidence kept mounting. Email exchanges with Bill Gates discussing population control through pandemic response, meeting notes from the World Economic Forum planning the Great Reset, contingent on a global health crisis, even recordings from Fauci's own iPhone, carelessly backing up conversations he thought were private. In one recording, played for the stunned committee, Fauci could be heard talking to Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance. Fauci, the beauty is, once it's out, they'll beg for vaccines, mandatory vaccines, vaccine teen passports. Total
Daszak and the origin.
Fauci, we blame the wet market, maybe some pangolins. The media will sell whatever we tell them. Daszak, what about researchers who might talk? Fauci, the Chinese will handle their end. Anyone who speaks up here will destroy their careers. Call them conspiracy theorists. It worked with AIDS, it'll work again. The recording ended. The silence in the room was deafening. Deidre. Fauci, Kash Patel said quietly, do you recognize your voice in that recording? Fauci's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. After a long pause, Fauci spoke. I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. You invoke them now, Byron said, but you were quite talkative in your messages with Chinese researchers, like this one from December 2019. As the virus spread, congratulations on successful deployment. Remember, act surprised when it reaches America. The committee chair, Jim Jordan, had remained quiet through most of the testimony. Now he leaned forward. Dr. Fauci, I want to be very clear about what we're discussing here. You're being accused of crimes against humanity, of deliberately releasing a bioweapon that killed millions, of profiting from mass death. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Fauci looked around the room, at the cameras, the reporters, the committee members staring at him with disgust. His legacy, built over decades, lay in ruins. The America's doctor, persona he'd cultivated, was dead-eye. He started, then stopped. His lawyer grabbed his arm, but Fauci shook him off. I want to make a statement. The room leaned in. Everything I did, Fauci began, his voice shaking, was for the greater good. The world was overpopulated. Climate change was accelerating. Traditional methods weren't working. We needed. His lawyer practically tackled him. Don't say another word. But Fauci continued, seemingly in a trance. Gates understood. The Chinese understood. A controllable pandemic could reset everything. Reduce population. Implement digital controls. Save the planet from humanity. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even hardened reporters looked shocked. This wasn't evasion or excuse-making. It was an admission of genocide. Kash Patel recovered first. You're saying you deliberately created and released COVID-19. We refined it. Fauci said, his eyes now glazed. The Chinese had the base virus. We made it more transmissible. Added features. Made sure it would spread globally but remain controllable with our vaccines. How many people did you expect to die? Models showed 10-15 million. Acceptable losses for planetary survival. Acceptable losses. Byron Donald's voice shook with rage. 7 million people are dead. More than projected. Fauci admitted with chilling calm. The variants were unexpected. Evolution is unpredictable. His lawyer was now physically trying to cover Fauci's mouth. But the dam had broken. Years of lies, of carrying the weight of mass murder, had finally cracked him. The vaccines were ready before the virus was released, he continued. Moderna, Pfizer, they all knew. We gave them the sequence in November 2019. The whole response was choreographed. Lockdowns to break resistance. Masks as a compliance test. Vaccines as the final control mechanism. Control mechanism? Jim Jordan asked. Digital health passes were always the goal. A global system to track, trace, and control every human. The virus was just the excuse to implement it. The hearing room had become a crime scene. FBI agents who had been waiting outside entered on Jim Jordan's signal. As they approached Fauci, He kept talking, like a man in a confessional. We picked elderly and obese for termination. The virus was designed to spare the young and healthy. Eugenics disguised as nature. Margaret Sanger would have been proud. The agents cuffed him as he rambled on about population targets, social credit systems, and the necessary culling of humanity. His lawyer had given up, slumped in his chair, knowing his client had just confessed to the greatest crime in human history. But the investigation was far from over. The names Fauci had dropped. Gates, specific Chinese officials, pharmaceutical executives, all became targets. Within hours, arrest warrants were issued. Some suspects fled, others were caught at airports trying to escape. Peter Daszak was arrested at his home, trying to burn documents in his fireplace. Ralph Barrick, the scientist who'd helped design the virus, was caught attempting to cross into Canada. Moderna executives were detained at their headquarters, shredding machines still warm. The international fallout was immediate. China initially denied everything. But when presented with the evidence, including communications from their own officials, they threw their scientists under the bus, claiming they were rogue actors. At the WHO, Director General Tedros Adhanom tried to distance himself, but emails showed he'd been fully briefed on the plan. He resigned in disgrace, then disappeared, reportedly fleeing to Ethiopia. Bill Gates, named repeatedly in the documents, lawyered up immediately. His foundation's offices were raided simultaneously in Seattle, New York, and Geneva. What investigators found there would fuel months of additional hearings. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Lick Mengyan, the Chinese whistleblower who'd tried to warn the world in 2020, came forward with additional evidence she'd held back out of fear. "I have video," she told investigators. Video of the planning meetings. Video of the virus being created. Video of them celebrating when the first cases appeared. The videos were horrifying. Scientists in lab coats toasting champagne as they watched computer models of global spread. Fauci on a secure video call with Chinese military officials, discussing optimal release locations. Gates calculating profit projections from vaccines while bodies were still piling up in Wuhan. One video, date stamped October 2019, showed Fauci in the Wuhan lab itself, despite his claims of never visiting. He was examining virus samples with Shi Zhengli, the Bat woman, who'd collected the original coronaviruses. "This one," Fauci said in the video, pointing to a particular sample. "This is our baby, HIV inserts working perfectly. Furin cleavage site optimal. It's beautiful. How many will it kill?" she asked in accented English. "Enough," Fauci replied. "Enough to change everything." The trial of Anthony Fauci became the most watched event in human history. Broadcast globally, translated into every language, it was humanity's reckoning with evil disguised as science. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically. The creation of the virus, the deliberate release, the suppression of treatments to increase death rates, the prepared vaccines that generated hundreds of billions in profits, the planned erosion of civil liberties, the depopulation agenda. Fauci's defense team tried various strategies: mental illness, coercion by foreign powers, even claims that he was trying to save humanity from itself. But the evidence was too overwhelming, his own confession too damning. Witnesses included survivors who'd lost entire families, doctors who'd been censored for promoting early treatments, scientists who'd been destroyed for questioning the natural origin narrative. Each testimony added another layer to the horror. Dr. Peter McCullough testified about how effective treatments were suppressed. "We could have saved 85% of those who died, but they wanted deaths. Deaths created fear. Fear enabled control." Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of mRNA technology, explained how his invention had been weaponized. "They turned my life-saving technology into a control system." The vaccines were never about immunity. They were about compliance. Even nurses and hospital workers testified about the protocols that maximized deaths. Ventilators that killed, remdesivir that destroyed kidneys, isolation that broke spirits, all designed to inflate mortality and justify draconian measures. The economic devastation was laid bare. Small businesses destroyed while Amazon thrived, wealth transferred from the middle class to billionaires, children's education sacrificed, mental health crisis, suicides, drug overdoses, all collateral damage in Fauci's war on humanity. International testimony was equally damning. Italian doctors described being told to inflate death numbers. British scientists revealed pressure to fake models showing millions would die. Australian officials admitted camps were built before the virus even arrived. The defense's star witness was supposed to be Dr. Deborah Birx, Fauci's former colleague, but when she took the stand, she broke down. "I knew," she sobbed. "God help me, but I was scared. They threatened my family. Said I'd die like Carrie Mullis if I talked." "Who threatened you?" the prosecutor asked. Tony Fauci. He said whistleblowers would be handled like the ones before." She revealed a list of scientists who died mysteriously after questioning narratives. Car accidents, sudden heart attacks, suicides with no note, all people who knew too much. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts: crimes against humanity, mass murder, terrorism, treason. The judge, his voice shaking with emotion, delivered the sentence. "Anthony Stephen Fauci, you have been found guilty of the most heinous crimes in human history. You weaponized science to commit genocide. You betrayed every oath you took as a physician. You turned healing into killing on an industrial scale. This court sentences you to death by lethal injection. However, given the unique nature of your crimes, you will first serve life in solitary confinement, where you will have time to contemplate the millions of lives you destroyed. May God have mercy on your soul, because humanity cannot." As Fauci was led away, he turned one last time to the cameras. But instead of remorse, his face showed only the cold calculation of a man who'd played God and lost. The trials continued for years. The network Fauci had revealed was vast, spanning governments, corporations, and NGOs. Each conviction revealed more conspirators. The pandemic industrial complex was dismantled piece by piece. China faced international sanctions and reparations that crippled its economy. The Communist Party fell within 2 years, unable to survive the shame of being exposed as a partner in global genocide. Pharmaceutical companies were nationalized, their profits from the pandemic seized to compensate victims. Executives faced tribunals. Some fled to non-extradition countries, living as fugitives. The media faced its own reckoning. Journalists who'd suppressed truth, while knowing people were dying, were charged as accessories. News organizations that had taken government money to push propaganda were shuttered. Tech companies that had censored warnings and promoted lies faced antitrust actions that broke them into pieces. Their executives joined the growing ranks of defendants in history's largest criminal proceeding. But perhaps the most significant change was in science itself. The blind trust in experts was shattered. New systems of transparency were implemented. Research required open data. Funding sources had to be public. Conflicts of interest became criminal offenses. Medical freedom became a constitutional right globally. Informed consent was absolute. Mandates were banned. The Nuremberg Code was updated and given teeth. Violations now carried mandatory life sentences. In schools, the Fauci trials became required study. How science was corrupted. How media manufactured consent. How fear overrode reason. How good people stayed silent while evil flourished. The lessons were brutal but necessary. Memorials rose globally. Not just for the dead, but for the truth. Never again took on new meaning. Not just genocide by bullets or gas, but by syringes and lies. Fauci himself lived another 3 years in solitary confinement before his execution. Guards reported he showed no remorse, spending his time writing manifestos about overpopulation and the necessity of his actions. They were never published. The court ordered them destroyed. His execution was carried out on March 11, 2026, exactly 6 years after the W declared COVID a pandemic. Lethal injection, the same method he'd used on millions, but with actual informed consent. His last words were reportedly, "I regret nothing. Humanity needed culling. I just failed to finish the job." But humanity had finished its job. The greatest criminal in history was dead. The network that enabled him was destroyed. And from the ashes of the darkest chapter in human history, a new vigilance arose. The Wuhan labs were demolished, the ground salted. Gain-of-function research was banned globally with penalties of death. Bioweapons treaties were rewritten with enforcement mechanisms that had teeth. Every year on March 11, the world observes Truth Day. A reminder that experts can become executioners. That science without ethics is savagery. That trust must be earned and verified, never blind. In the end, Fauci achieved the opposite of his goals. Instead of reducing population, he inspired a baby boom as people rejected his anti-human ideology. Instead of global control, he sparked a freedom movement that toppled tyrannies. Instead of being remembered as a savior, he became history's greatest villain. The virus he created killed millions, But the truth he tried to suppress saved billions more from future tyrants wearing lab coats. In that way, perhaps justice was served. The congressional hearing that exposed him became required viewing in schools. Children learned to question, to demand evidence, to resist authority claiming to act for the greater good. They learned that sometimes the greatest evil comes with degrees and titles and promises of safety. Kash Patel and Byron Donalds, the men who exposed the truth, were honored but took no joy in it. "We didn't want to be right," Patel said at the memorial dedication. "We wanted to be wrong. We wanted Fauci to be the healer he pretended to be. But wanting doesn't make it so." Byron added, "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We forgot that. We trusted too much. We questioned too little. May future generations learn from our failure." And they did. The post-Fauci world was more skeptical but also more free. More questioning but also more honest. More divided on some issues but united in one. Never again would they allow anyone, no matter their credentials, to play God with human lives. The Wuhan confession had changed everything. Not just by exposing one man's crimes, but by revealing how fragile freedom was, how easily fear could override reason, how quickly good people could become accomplices to evil. Fauci was dead, but his real legacy lived on, not in the millions he killed, but in the billions who would never again blindly trust anyone who claimed the right to control them for their own good. In that way, perhaps, the victims had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had purchased humanity's most expensive lesson, that the price of freedom included the courage to question those who claimed to be saving you. The virus was created in a lab, but the cure, eternal vigilance against would-be saviors, was forged in the human spirit's refusal to be enslaved. That was Fauci's confession, and humanity's redemption.